Secrets buried beneath the silent lake. The case that was never meant to be solved. The train crawled through the fog like an old beast, its whistle echoing faintly across the silent hills of Blackridge. Detective Marcus Hale sat by the window, watching the reflection of his tired face blur against the passing shadows. It had been 10 years since he last set foot in this town, a decade since the night the lake took a life and left behind only questions that no one dared to answer. The letter had come 2 weeks ago, and signed but unmistakably meant for him. It said only, the truth about the lake was never drowned. Come back, before it's buried again. That was enough to bring Marcus out of his quiet retirement. He had left the force 5 years ago after too many unsolved cases and too many ghosts that followed him home. But this one was personal. The silent lake wasn't just another case. It was the one that had haunted his dreams for years. As he stepped off the train, a sharp wind met him, carrying the familiar scent of pine and damp earth. Blackridge hadn't changed much. The cobblestone streets still gleamed faintly under the mist. The same old cafe still stood near the station, its flickering neon sign spelling Molly's Diner. Inside, he found warmth and a few familiar faces that looked older but not friendlier. Molly herself was behind the counter, wiping glasses. When she saw him, her expression froze. "Marcus Hale," she said softly. "Didn't think I'd see your face again. Not after what happened." "Neither did I," Marcus replied, sliding into a booth. "But it seems the lake hasn't forgotten me." Molly hesitated before setting a cup of black coffee in front of him. "You should let it stay forgotten. That lake's cursed, Marcus. Everyone who goes digging into its secrets ends up disappearing." He took a slow sip. "Maybe. But someone wants me to dig. And I don't like leaving debts unpaid." Her eyes flickered nervously toward the window. "Then be careful. The people around here don't like questions anymore. Not about the lake, and not about the girl." The girl. The name still rang in his head. Elena Marlowe. She was 23, a university student home for the summer, found dead at the edge of the silent lake. Officially, it was ruled an accident, drowning caused by a sudden fall during a late-night walk. But Marcus had seen the bruises on her wrists, the strange mark on her neck that didn't belong to the lake. He had tried to push the investigation further back then, but the town council had closed it abruptly, calling it a tragic misstep. He had always suspected otherwise. After leaving the diner, Marcus checked into the old Blackridge Inn. The woman at the reception, Mrs. Dalton, gave him a tight smile when she saw his name. "You're back," she said, her voice thin. "People here don't come back, detective. You should remember that." "I do," he replied. "But I'm not here to stay. Just to finish something." That night, sleep didn't come easily. The rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window. Somewhere in the distance, the lake was hidden behind layers of fog, its surface calm, deceptive, and silent as a grave. Just past midnight, Marcus got up, pulled on his coat, and drove toward the old Marlowe estate. The mansion stood on a hill overlooking the lake, its once grand architecture now draped in decay. It had been abandoned for years, ever since Elena's parents moved away after her death. But someone had recently forced the gate open. He stepped inside cautiously, flashlight in hand. The air smelled of mildew and rot. Dust covered everything, except for a faint trail of footprints leading toward the back of the house. His heart pounded as he followed the trail to the study, a place he remembered from the old photos in the case file. The desk drawers were open. Papers were scattered across the floor. And on the wall, someone had drawn a symbol in chalk, 2 overlapping circles with a vertical line cutting through them. It was faint, but deliberate. Marcus crouched down to examine it. That same symbol had been found near the lake years ago, carved into a tree trunk near where Elena's body was discovered. Back then, no one could identify it. Some said it was part of an old local folklore about the lake keeper, a spirit that protected the waters. Others said it was a secret sign used by the Marlowe family in their private dealings. As Marcus stood up, a creak echoed from the hallway behind him. He turned sharply, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. "Who's there?" he called out. Silence. Then a whisper. It was soft, barely audible, but it came from somewhere near the stairs. He moved closer, his every step deliberate, steady. Then, from the top of the stairs, a shadow shifted. A woman's figure, faint and pale, standing in the dim light. Her hair was wet, tangled. Her clothes clung to her as though she had just walked out of the lake. Elena? The name escaped him before he could stop it. The figure didn't move. Then, in a voice that sounded like wind through hollow glass, she whispered, "You shouldn't have come back." The next instant, she vanished into the dark. Marcus rushed up the stairs, but there was nothing. No sign of anyone, no wet footprints, no open window. Just the sound of the wind whistling through broken panes. He stood there, his mind racing. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was guilt. But part of him knew what he saw was real. The lake had begun to whisper again, and when it did, it never whispered lies. As he turned to leave, something on the floor caught his eye, a silver locket, half buried in dust. Inside was a faded photograph of Elena Marlowe, smiling beside a young man Marcus didn't recognize. On the back, engraved in tiny letters, were the words, "Meet me where it all began. Yem." Marcus pocketed the locket and stepped outside. The fog over the lake had grown thicker, curling like smoke around the trees. Somewhere in that silence, he thought he heard the faint splash of water and the sound of someone breathing just beneath the surface. He stared into the distance, the chills settling deep in his bones. The case he had once failed to solve had come back to life, and this time, it seemed the lake itself wanted him to find the truth. The next morning arrived gray and heavy with mist. The lake was veiled in fog, its surface motionless, as if it were holding its breath. Marcus stood at the edge, the damp grass soaking through his boots. The locket weighed heavily in his pocket, the name engraved on it still echoing in his thoughts. "Meet me where it all began." He had spent the night going through his old case notes, revisiting the details he had once been forced to abandon. Elena Marlowe had drowned on the night of June 12th, 10 years ago. She had been seen last leaving a party at the old boathouse by the lake. Witnesses said she was upset, arguing with someone on the phone before she vanished. Her body was found 2 days later by a fisherman. The police ruled it an accident, but the bruises, the symbol, and the council's sudden interference told another story. Someone had wanted it buried, just like Elena. As Marcus scanned the lake, he noticed something new, a small wooden boat tied loosely to a half-broken pier. It wasn't there last night. The rope was still wet, and the oars were missing. Someone had used it recently. He crouched near the pier and found faint footprints, small, probably a woman's, leading from the water's edge into the forest. He followed them quietly. The path wound through tall pines until it led him to a narrow dirt road and a small cabin he didn't remember being there a decade ago. The door was slightly ajar. Marcus drew his gun and stepped inside. The air smelled of damp wood and smoke. Dust floated in the sunlight that seeped through the cracks. On the table lay old photographs of the Marlowe family, Elena as a child, smiling beside her parents. But there was another face in several of them, a man, tall with dark hair and a sharp gaze. Marcus frowned. He didn't recognize him from the old reports. Beside the photos lay a torn piece of newspaper from 2014. The headline read, "Mysterious drowning at Silent Lake. Investigation close." Someone had circled the word closed in red ink. Then he heard movement behind him. A floorboard creaked. He turned, gun raised. A woman stood in the doorway, her face pale, her expression startled. She wore a gray coat and carried a small backpack. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded. "I should be asking you that," she said quickly. "You're trespassing." "Detective Marcus Hale," he replied, lowering his weapon slightly. "And you?" She hesitated. "Clara Marlowe. Elena was my sister." Marcus froze. "You're Elena's sister? But you left town right after her death." Clara nodded slowly. "I had to. The town didn't want me here. After the funeral, they told me to stop asking questions, said it was better to forget." Her eyes hardened. "But I couldn't. I know my sister didn't drown by accident." Marcus studied her closely. There was grief in her voice, the kind that time couldn't dull. Why come back now? Because I finally found something. She walked past him and opened a drawer. Inside was a small wooden box wrapped in plastic. She placed it on the table. This was found at the bottom of the lake by a diver a month ago. He was exploring near the old boathouse ruins when he saw something shiny. It's my sister's diary. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. You've read it? Only part of it, she said. The rest is water-damaged. But one page was clear enough. She handed him a torn piece of paper. The ink was smudged but readable. June 11th, 2014, he said he knows about Father's deal with the council. He said if I talk, everyone will suffer. I told him I wasn't afraid anymore. I was wrong. Marcus looked up sharply. Father's deal with the council? What kind of deal? Clara shook her head. I don't know. Father never spoke about his business after we moved here. But the night Elena died, I remember hearing her argue with someone on the phone. She sounded scared. Marcus exhaled slowly. Whoever she spoke to that night, he's the one who didn't want this case reopened. Clara nodded. And I think he still doesn't. Before Marcus could respond, a car engine roared outside. Clara quickly pushed the diary back into the box. They both peered through the window. A black SUV was parked on the dirt road, its windows tinted. Two men stepped out. They wore dark coats, and one of them carried something metallic that glinted in the light. Stay down, Marcus whispered, pulling Clara behind the wall. The men approached the cabin, moving with practiced caution. One stopped by the window, scanning the interior. The other tried the door. Marcus's mind raced. Whoever they weren't locals, and they weren't here by accident. He motioned for Clara to stay quiet as he reached for his gun again. The doorknob rattled. Then a loud bang. The door swung open violently. Marcus fired once, a warning shot that shattered a lamp beside the doorway. The men froze, then ducked behind the SUV. One shouted, "We don't want trouble, detective. Hand over the box." So they knew who he was. How do you know about the box? Marcus shouted back. No answer, just the crack of a bullet hitting the wooden wall inches from his head. Go, he hissed at Clara, pointing to the back door. They ran out through the trees as more shots rang out behind them. Branches snapped. Bullets tore through the fog. They didn't stop running until they reached the lake again, gasping for air. Clara looked shaken. Who were they? Marcus glanced around warily. People who don't want this case reopened. Probably the same ones who closed it 10 years ago. She clutched the box tightly. Then we can't stop now. We have to find out what my sister meant by Father's deal. Marcus nodded slowly. We will. But we'll need help. He turned toward the town, where the church steeple barely rose above the fog. There's someone who might know. Father Thomas. He was close to your family, wasn't he? Clara hesitated. Yes, but he left the parish after Elena's death. People said he lost his faith. Maybe he lost something else, Marcus said grimly. Let's find out. They started walking toward town, unaware that from the far side of the lake, a lone figure stood watching them through binoculars. The figure lowered the lens, revealing a scar running down the side of his face. He spoke into a small radio clipped to his jacket. They found the diary, he said. What do we do? A voice crackled through the speaker. Cold, emotionless. Follow them. The lake has kept its secrets long enough. The man nodded once, eyes fixed on Marcus and Clara as they disappeared into the mist. The silent lake rippled faintly, as if something beneath its surface had just awakened. By the time Marcus and Clara reached the outskirts of Blackridge, the fog had thickened into a ghostly shroud that dimmed even the morning sun. The road leading to St. Helena's Church was cracked and overgrown, like everything else the town had abandoned to time. The once white chapel stood at the edge of the forest, its bell tower leaning slightly to one side. Clara hesitated at the gate. It looks deserted. Marcus nodded. Maybe. But priests don't just vanish, they retreat. The wooden doors groaned as they pushed them open. Inside, the church smelled of wax and dust. Faded light streamed through stained glass windows, painting pale colors across the pews. Candles flickered weakly at the altar, and somewhere deeper inside, the faint sound of footsteps echoed. A voice spoke from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here." Father Thomas emerged slowly from the darkness of the confessional booth. He looked older, frilier, his once dark hair now a crown of white. His cassock was worn and patched, but his eyes were still sharp. "Father Thomas," Marcus said carefully, "we need to talk about Elena Marlowe." The priest froze, his expression tightening. "That name shouldn't be spoken here. Not anymore." Clara stepped forward. "She was my sister. You baptized her. You knew her better than most. Please tell us what really happened." Thomas's eyes softened for a moment. "Clara, I prayed for her soul every night. But there are things you're not meant to uncover." "Then why are there people trying to kill us for asking questions?" Marcus cut in. "Someone sent men to silence us. Someone powerful. I think the church knows who." The priest turned away, walking slowly toward the altar. He ran his fingers along the cracked wood of the cross. 10 years ago, he said, "Your father, Jonathan Marlowe, came to me. He was desperate. The family business was falling apart. He said he'd found a way to save it, a deal with the council." "What kind of deal?" Marcus asked. Thomas's eyes glimmered in the dim light. "A sacrifice." Clara's breath caught. "You mean money? Or—" The priest shook his head slowly. "No. Something far older. The Marlowe family had roots here that went back centuries, even before the town was founded. There's a legend of the Silent Lake being a gateway, a place where offerings were made to keep the land fertile and the people safe. Jonathan told me the council wanted to use that legend to draw investors to turn the town into a tourist haven. But to begin the project, they held a ceremony by the lake, one they said was only symbolic." He paused, his voice trembling. "But it wasn't. That night, something was awakened. The next morning, Elena was gone." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Are you saying my father was involved in her death?" Thomas looked at her, guilt etched deep in his face. "He came to me after the funeral. He said he tried to stop them, but it was too late. Whatever was done at that lake, it demanded a life." Marcus clenched his jaw. "And the council buried it under the guise of an accident." The priest nodded. "They paid the police, the coroner, everyone. I tried to speak up once, but they threatened to close the church. Said if I kept talking, the town would turn against me. I lost everything after that." Clara stepped closer. "Father, we found Elena's diary. She wrote about a man who knew of my father's deal. Do you know who that could be?" Thomas hesitated. Then he whispered, "Yes. His name was Victor Lang. He was the council's lawyer and Jonathan's partner. He disappeared a few days after the drowning." Marcus's expression hardened. Disappeared, or was made to disappear? Before the priest could answer, a loud thud echoed from the entrance. The door slammed shut, and the faint light from outside vanished. Marcus spun around, gun raised. "Father, do you have anyone else here?" Thomas shook his head fearfully. "No, I live alone." A voice drifted from the shadows, calm, deliberate. "Detective Hale. You never learn when to stop chasing ghosts." Out of the dark stepped the scarred man Marcus had seen near the lake, the one who'd been watching them. He held a pistol aimed straight at Marcus. Behind him, another figure appeared, cloaked and silent. "Put the gun down," Marcus ordered, his finger steady on the trigger. The scarred man smirked. "I'm only here for the diary." Clara tightened her grip on the box in her hands. "You'll have to kill me first." "That can be arranged," he said coldly, taking a step forward. Before Marcus could react, Father Thomas moved suddenly, stepping in front of Clara. "No more blood," the priest said, voice shaking but firm. "Not in this house." The scarred man hesitated just long enough for Marcus to aim and fire. The bullet struck the ground near his feet, forcing him back. A fight broke out, chaotic, violent. The second attacker lunged toward Clara, grabbing her arm, but she swung the wooden box hard against his head. Paper scattered across the floor as Marcus tackled the first man to the ground. In the struggle, a candle fell, rolling into a pile of old hymn books. Flames began to climb up the curtains. Smoke filled the church as the men grappled. The scarred man pushed Marcus off and ran toward the door, shouting to his partner, "Forget them. Burn it all." Marcus fired once more, grazing his shoulder, but the man escaped into the fog. The second one followed, limping and coughing. The priest collapsed against a pew, clutching his chest. "Go," he gasped. "Save what's left before it's all lost again." Marcus and Clara dragged him outside as the church burned behind them, flames devouring the roof. They watched in silence as the cross at the top of the bell tower finally gave way, collapsing into the fire. Father Thomas coughed weakly. "They won't stop now," he murmured. "The lake, it's their altar. And the final offering is still owed." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. The priest's voice dropped to a whisper. "The deal wasn't for wealth, it was for protection. Something was promised a soul every 10 years. And now, the time has come again." Clara's eyes widened. "You mean someone else is going to die?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Unless you end it. Find Victor Lang. He's the only one who knows how to break the pact." Then, with one final breath, the priest's eyes closed, and his hand slipped from Marcus's grip. For a long moment neither spoke. The fire crackled behind them, casting orange light across the fog. Marcus finally stood, his face grim. "We need to find Victor Lang, before the lake takes another soul." Clara wiped her tears, nodding. "Where do we start?" Marcus looked toward the horizon where the mist hung thick over the water. "If he's still alive, he'll be hiding somewhere near the lake. That's where all of this began, and that's where it'll end." As they walked away from the burning church, the reflection of the flames danced across the lake's still surface. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw a face staring back, a pale face with long hair, eyes open, waiting. Then the ripple spread, and the image was gone. The next day dawned dim and gray, the kind of morning where the sun seemed afraid to rise. Smoke still curled from the ruins of St. Helena's Church, and word had spread quickly through the small town. The old priest was gone. But the townsfolk said little. Blackridge had learned long ago to keep its silence. Marcus and Clara sat inside the inn's empty dining hall, a map spread across the table. The air smelled faintly of burned wood and rain. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she traced her finger along the outline of the silent lake. "There's only one place we haven't searched," she said. "The old mine on the northern ridge. Father Thomas mentioned Victor Lang vanished near there. If he's alive, he might still be hiding in those tunnels." Marcus nodded. "Or he's buried in them." They packed what little they had, a flashlight, a gun, the half-burned diary pages they had managed to save, and the locket. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of the lake, metallic and cold. As they drove toward the northern ridge, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following them. A black vehicle had appeared behind them twice that morning, only to vanish into the mist each time. When they reached the mouth of the abandoned mine, the fog was so thick it seemed to breathe. The wooden beams marking the entrance were rotting, half-collapsed. A faded sign hung crookedly. "Danger, no entry." Clara shivered. "This place feels wrong." Marcus adjusted his flashlight. "So, does the truth most people try to hide?" They stepped inside. The air grew colder, the echo of their footsteps swallowed by the tunnel's depth. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, and the walls shimmered with moisture. The deeper they went, the more Marcus felt the pressure of the earth pressing in on them. After several turns, they reached a small cavern. A single lantern flickered weakly in the corner. Someone had been here recently. Clara froze. "Marcus, look." A man was sitting against the far wall, thin and pale, his beard unkempt and his clothes tattered. His eyes opened slowly as they approached. "Victor Lang," Marcus said quietly. The man's lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "Detective Hale. I was wondering when you'd come." "You know me?" Marcus asked. "I know your reputation. The detective who never lets go. Victor coughed weakly. That's dangerous in a town like Blackridge. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling. You were my father's partner. You helped make that deal, didn't you? Victor's gaze shifted to her, and his face softened. Clara Marlowe, you look like your sister. She flinched. Don't say her name unless you're ready to tell the truth. Victor sighed, leaning his head back against the wall. The truth won't save you, girl. It never saved anyone in this town. But maybe it can stop what's coming. Marcus crouched beside him. Then start talking. What really happened 10 years ago? Victor's voice was low, almost hollow. The council wanted power. They thought the lake could give it to them, not through superstition, but through what they called energy. There's something beneath that lake, detective. Something ancient, older than the town. The miners found it decades ago, a strange black stone that pulsed like a heartbeat. They said it was alive. He swallowed hard. The Marlowe family owned the land, so your father made a deal with the council. They'd excavate the stone, sell it as a rare mineral, and split the profits. But the miners who touched it changed. Some went mad. Some vanished. They called it the heart of the lake. Marcus frowned. And Elena? Victor's eyes darkened. She found out. She discovered the council wasn't just after money. They were using the stone in rituals. They believed it could grant prosperity if it was fed a life every decade. Elena threatened to expose them. Your father tried to protect her, but the others wouldn't allow it. Clara's face went pale. Are you saying they killed her? Victor nodded slowly. They drowned her in the lake during the ceremony. And when your father tried to stop them, they silenced him too. Made it look like he died in an accident months later. After that, I ran. I've been hiding here ever since. Marcus's jaw tightened. And the scarred man? The one following us. Victor's expression grew grim. His name is Reed. He works for the current head of the council, Mayor Alistair Crow. Crow wants to reopen the mining site. He believes the heart still holds power, but it needs another sacrifice to awaken fully. That's why they burned the church. Father Thomas knew too much. The cavern trembled faintly. Somewhere deeper inside, water dripped faster. Clara looked frightened. You mean they're going to do it again? Victor nodded. Tonight. During the storm. They'll use the lake's rising tide to finish what they started. Marcus stood. Then we stopped them. Victor shook his head weakly. You can't stop what the lake wants, detective. It always takes what it's owed. Maybe, Marcus said, his voice low, but I've never been good at listening to curses. They helped Victor to his feet, but before they could leave the mine, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them, heavy, deliberate. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Reed's voice echoed coldly through the tunnel. I told you, Hale. Some cases aren't meant to be solved. Marcus shoved Clara and Victor toward a side passage. Run. Bullets ricocheted off the stone walls as Reed fired. The air filled with dust. Marcus returned fire, covering their escape, but one bullet grazed his arm. He stumbled, cursing under his breath. They reached an opening that led to the surface. The exit opened onto the northern cliffs overlooking the silent lake. A storm had begun to gather. Thunder rolling across the hills, lightning splitting the sky. Clara turned back to help Marcus. You're hurt. I've had worse, he said through gritted teeth. Victor pointed toward the far side of the lake, where dim lights flickered. There, the old boathouse. That's where they'll perform the ritual. Marcus nodded. Then that's where we end this. Behind them, Reed emerged from the mine, gun in hand. Lightning flashed, illuminating his scarred face. He raised the weapon and fired, hitting Victor in the shoulder. The man collapsed with a cry. Go! Victor shouted, clutching his wound. Stop them before it's too late. Clara tried to reach him, but Marcus pulled her away. We can't save him now. We have to move. They ran down the muddy path toward the boathouse as the rain began to pour. The lake churned violently, waves slapping against the shore. The once silent water now roared, as if awakening from a long sleep. When they reached the boathouse, its doors were wide open. Inside, Torches flickered around a strange altar made of black stone. The same symbol Marcus had seen before, 2 circles and a vertical line, was carved deep into its surface. Mayor Crow stood before it, his eyes wild, chanting words Marcus couldn't understand. Around him were 4 men in dark coats, the remaining council members. And at the altar's base a rope, waiting for a new victim. Clara's breath caught. They're going to... Marcus didn't let her finish. He stepped forward, gun raised, his voice cutting through the storm. It's over, Crow. The mayor turned slowly, smiling. Ah, Detective Hale. You've arrived just in time to witness history. You call this murder history? Marcus growled. Crow spread his arms. You can't kill what the lake already owns. The offering will be made, and this town will prosper once more. He snapped his fingers, and 2 men lunged toward Marcus. A shot rang out, one dropped instantly. Marcus struck the other with the butt of his gun. Clara ran to the altar and grabbed the torch, hurling it at the symbol. The flames flared, but the stone didn't burn. It pulsed, glowing faintly from within. Crow shouted, "You fool! You'll wake it too soon." The ground shook violently. Cracks spread across the floor as water began seeping through. The lake itself seemed to rise, waves slamming against the boathouse walls. Marcus grabbed Clara's arm. "We need to go, now." But before they could escape, something emerged from the water. Dark, shapeless, glistening like oil. It moved with an unnatural grace, tendrils stretching toward the altar. Crow screamed, "The heart! It's alive!" The creature's shadow enveloped him. The mayor's scream was cut short as he was dragged into the depths. The councilmen scattered in terror, but the water swallowed them too, one by one. Marcus and Clara ran through the collapsing structure, the storm roaring above them. The lake's voice filled the air, a whisper, soft and endless. "Return what was taken." Clara stopped suddenly, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, it's her. It's Elena." He turned. Through the rain, he saw her, a figure standing on the water's surface, pale and shimmering. Her voice was faint but clear. "You must end it," she whispered. "Destroy the heart." Then she vanished beneath the waves. Marcus looked at Clara. "If we can shatter the stone, maybe the lake will release her and itself." Clara nodded. "Then let's finish it." They turned back toward the altar, now cracked and glowing brighter than before. Marcus aimed his gun at it. "This is for Elena." He fired. The explosion was deafening, a burst of light and sound that shook the ground. The altar shattered, and a wave of water erupted upward, sweeping through the boathouse. Marcus grabbed Clara as the current pulled them toward the lake. Everything went white. The following days passed in a blur of silence and suspicion. The small town of Silver Pine returned to its uneasy calm, pretending that the horrors beneath the lake had not been unearthed. But beneath that still surface, both the lake and the town carried a wound that would never heal. Detective Nathan Cole sat by the lake once more, the morning mist curling around him like an old memory. His notebook lay open on his lap, its pages filled with unanswered questions, sketches of the symbols, and the names of those whose lives had ended in the name of silence. He had uncovered the truth, but not all of it. Some pieces were still missing, deliberately buried by hands more powerful than he had imagined. After the revelation of the cult and the involvement of Old Town officials, the authorities had arrived. Yet, as the days went on, Nathan noticed how quickly the files were locked away, the investigation quietly redirected. People who had been ready to talk suddenly stopped answering his calls. Reports vanished. The lake was sealed off, for safety reasons. Even Clara, the young woman who had lost her mother in the tragedy, had disappeared overnight, leaving only a note on Nathan's car windshield. "Some secrets are not meant for light, Detective. Thank you for trying. Please stop before they come for you too." Nathan's hand trembled as he held the paper. He knew what she meant. He had seen the eyes of those who wanted the past to stay hidden, men in black cars, polite smiles, and veiled threats that didn't need to be spoken aloud. One night, unable to sleep, Nathan revisited his notes. He went over every clue, every word spoken by the survivors. There was one name that kept reappearing: Eleanor Marsh. She was the late mayor's wife, who had mysteriously drowned in the lake 25 years ago. Her death had been ruled accidental. But what if that was where it all began? He looked through the old records again, and something strange stood out. The original autopsy report was missing. In its place was a retyped copy, with no signatures. Nathan leaned back in his chair, realization striking him. Eleanor wasn't a victim. She had been the first to uncover the cult's secret rituals, and her death was the first cover-up in a long chain of lies. The Silent Lake wasn't just a burial ground. It was a vault, hiding the truth of the town's founders, who had built their fortunes on blood sacrifices disguised as traditions. The next morning, Nathan drove to the outskirts of town, where the Marsh estate still stood, abandoned yet untouched. The house was hidden behind tall pine trees, its roof sagging under years of decay. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and memories. He searched through the study, the floor creaking beneath his boots. Behind a faded portrait of Eleanor, he found a small iron box sealed with wax. Inside were letters, Eleanor's own handwriting. The letters told the entire story. The cult, known as the Circle of the Silent Lake, was formed by the town's most powerful families, politicians, priests, and businessmen. They believed that the lake was a divine gateway, demanding human offerings to ensure their prosperity. Eleanor had discovered the truth and tried to expose them. For that, she was drowned. Nathan's hands shook as he read her final letter. If anyone finds this, know that the lake remembers. It takes what is stolen and keeps what is hidden. I try to stop them. If you cannot destroy them, then let the world know what sleeps beneath the water. As thunder rolled outside, Nathan felt a chill crawl up his spine. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked behind him. He turned sharply, but no one was there. The shadows stretched long in the dim light, whispering through the cracks in the walls. It was as if the house itself breathed. Then came the faint sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway. Nathan drew his revolver. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing through the hollow rooms. A soft female voice answered, faint as a sigh. "You shouldn't have come back, Detective." He froze. The voice was familiar. It was Clara. She stepped out from the shadows, her eyes empty, her clothes damp. But something about her was wrong. Her face was pale, her expression distant. "They told me to stop you," she said softly, her voice trembling. "They said if I didn't, they'd make me join the others." Nathan lowered his gun. "Clara, listen to me. You don't have to." Before he could finish, the house shuddered. The floorboards groaned, and the sound of rushing water echoed from beneath. A thin stream began seeping through the cracks, like water, cold and black. Nathan grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her toward the door, but she resisted. "It's too late," she whispered. "They've woken it." The water surged faster, filling the room. Nathan pulled harder, shouting her name, but her eyes had gone blank. With one last look, she whispered, "The lake remembers." Then she slipped from his grasp and vanished into the water that swallowed the room. Nathan fought his way out of the collapsing house, bursting through the door just as the entire building began to sink. From the distance, he saw the dark shape of the lake rising, ripples spreading like veins. The Silent Lake was reclaiming what was once buried. He dropped a stone into the water, watching the ripples fade. "You win," he murmured. Some secrets were never meant to be solved. And somewhere, beneath the surface, the lake whispered back, a soft, eternal sound, carrying the weight of every truth buried too deep to rise again.